have continued to trail the 2022 appropriation bill following its submission by President Muhammadu Buhari to the National Assembly and subsequent breakdown by the Minister of Finance. Of course, experts have been speaking, and the National Assembly have set the ball rolling as consideration of the budget has begun in earnest in the two chambers of the National Assembly as they set December 15th deadline for the passage of the bill and 2 weeks ultimatum for the ministries, departments, and of course, agencies to defend their budget. Nigerians are reacting to the rising trend of some commodities, namely bread, sachet water, and gas. These are our focus for this week on Business 24. I'm Comfort and Modu, and we will get right to the business of the day right after this break. Do not go away.
For now, the best and most efficient way to avoid getting infected is through regular hygienic and sanitary practices as well as social distancing. As individuals, we remain the greatest weapon to fight this pandemic. By washing our hands regularly with clean water and soap, disinfecting frequently used surfaces and areas, coughing into a tissue or elbow, and strictly adhering to infection prevention control measures in health facilities, we can contain this virus.
If you're just joining us, this is Business 24 reaching you on NTA News 24. And following the presentation of the budget to the National Assembly, Minister of Finance Zainab Ahmed has presented a breakdown of the budget to the public, and economic watchers have been speaking on the provisions of the budget.
I've actually been at the vanguard of pushing for a higher budget for Nigeria because we have one of the lowest budgets in the world. As of last year and for many years that I've been following this, South Africa's national education budget alone is usually equivalent to our entire national budget. So that budget can be described as ambitious. However, we could say that the government is beginning to wake up to the fact that we have one of the smallest per capita budgets in the world. When you also have to convert that into US dollars to be able to benchmark what other countries are doing, you probably realize that, in this year that we're talking about, in the last 1 year, we've devalued the currency by about 35–40% or more. And if that's so, 16 trillion is perhaps equivalent to maybe about 10 trillion last year. So we can't say it's ambitious. The 6.2 trillion is actually the new borrowing that will be done. The deficit is going to be about 4 trillion from what I saw, meaning the difference between the expenditure and the revenue, which is a bit smaller than what we had last year and the year before. The challenge is we need to get out of deficit budgeting. The essence of the deficit budgeting is actually to be able to balance the budget in the near term. So when you run deficit budgeting in a normal country, 2, 3, 4 years, the next year you want to have a balanced budget, because you can't keep borrowing. What it means to have deficit budgeting of that proportion year on year is that you continually just keep borrowing. And when you're borrowing, to a large extent, you are sweeping a lot of things under the carpet, and you're not seeing the real measure and the issues within the economy. So, whereas it's going down a little bit, but I think we could do better in terms of balancing our budget. We need to increase, the avenues for making money in government. You see, government doesn't take only taxes as it were. Off the cuff, I'll tell you, government is entitled to taxes, to rates, to rents, to duties, to fines, to levies, right? See, so there's a gamut of things that government can think about. And of course, another way to look at it is that there are some aspects that are only accruable to state governments and local governments. And to a large extent, we're not seeing those levels of government pulling their weight. Everybody seems to depend on the federal government and what they can share. For example, property taxes are due and accrue to state governments and local governments. But in every state House of Assembly that issue has been raised, they've actually had to hack it down. And so when the big people in a state don't want to, who usually would find themselves in the Houses of Assembly and in government, don't want to pay property taxes, who's going to pay? Now, if the states actually got their property taxes in, there'll be less pressure on the federal government and a lot more will get done. So I'm saying that it goes beyond increasing taxation. However, also the other idea is to broaden the tax base to ensure that more people pay up their taxes and that those who are paying now pay the near accurate amount that they're supposed to pay. If you went down in Ghana here, I can't even begin to mention their tax system. It's one of the most optimized in the region.
The president have done enough in investment in brownfield on the transmission grid infrastructure for grid improvement package. This is the first time that we are seeing genuine intervention.
Give it to President Muhammadu Buhari. Between 2015 until now, he had made modest progression in terms of the percentage.
Senators passed the 2022 Appropriations Bill for second reading with emphasis on the expansion of railway lines across states, improved revenue generations and adequate remittance into government coffers, creation of more employment opportunities with the proposed loans and improved legislative oversight and budgets by the National Assembly were some of the recommendations from the senators, just as sustaining the trajectory of infrastructure development, improving revenue generation and provision of power supply took center stage as the House of Representatives debated on the 2022 budget proposal.
I want to appeal to the Senate that we should look at the health sector and provide more funds for the health sector.
Go into as much of mechanized agriculture as possible and give all forms of incentives to those who are willing to go into that area.
But when the railway lines take all our goods, the roads will be light and they will last long.
The budget being sent or being passed or being given to NDLA, as I look at it, is inadequate.
A PPP model and concessioning so that we can reduce borrowing.
Our roads in northern part of the country, take a look at the road project there. The ratio of the road project is very, very low.
There's need for us to be very vigilant and oversight very closely to ensure that the taking off is successful.
The oil sector should also be optimized for improved revenue so that we can reduce our deficit and borrowing.
We should further in response to what the agencies generate, also look back and see what they contribute to the Federation account.
We need additional of 500 billion naira in order to see some massive development in our road infrastructures.
Meanwhile, the National Assembly has set December 15 deadline for the passage of the bill in 2 weeks ultimatum for ministries, departments and agencies to defend their budget. Away from budgetary issues, figures from the National Bureau of Statistics show Nigerians' inflation rate fell for the 6th consecutive month in September amid decelerating food prices. The Statistics Office said Friday that the prices of goods and services measured by the Consumer Price Index rose by 16.63%. This is 0.38%, points lower than the rate recorded in August 2021, and that's 17.01%. On a month-on-month basis, the headline index increased by 1.15% in December 2021. a 0.13% rate higher than the rate recorded in August 2021, 1.02%.
The food component of the CPI constitutes the major component. And so any little change in the food component affects the totality, the overall figure at the end of the day. So it is a change in the food component that actually brought about the general decline, and for the fact that we are taking a total aggregate.
All right, in the meantime, Nigerians have been reacting to the rising prices of some commodities, namely bread and sachet water, which they say is gradually getting out of the reach of the common man, and that includes cooking gas.
I was buying 3,000. Later they started selling 3,500. From 3,500 to 4,000. From 4,000 to 5,500. From there, the last one I bought before this 7,002, I bought 6,500.
Nigerians have been crying out because the situation we are finding ourselves now is unbearable. Like bread, which is a staple food, for the prices to be soaring so high like that, it doesn't give anybody any joy at all. Look at the pure water, the commonest thing somebody can buy with 10 naira. The price has soared to 20 naira or more. Where are we going? The situation is unbearable. But government should do anything they feel they can do to reduce the hardship people are facing. You see, okay, even look at the gas, the cooking gas. We used to buy before 350 naira per kg. It's now 544 naira per kg. And even in some other states, we are here that it is almost 700 naira per kg.
It's actually a difficult issue, especially to an average Nigerian. It hasn't been easy buying pure water from 10 naira to 20 naira. Some are even selling a bag of pure water 300 naira. So to me, it hasn't been easy, but I thank God I can afford it. But I'm just feeling for other people. I don't know, okay? And for the issue of cooking gas, man, it's like they want us to go back to using firewood. That would just be the best.
The bread now, we don't have bread for 300, 350. Now bread is 500, 700, 800 now. Even the firewood itself is very expensive now. Charcoal, 100 now, charcoal cannot even do food for you. If you want to buy charcoal, you buy charcoal of 500, 300. If you have family, charcoal of 500 cannot even do your food.
Well, the situation is apparently biting very hard on the people. Well, Minister of State Petroleum Resources, Cpi Silva, says that government is actually looking into ways to ease the burden caused by the hike in prices of cooking gas.
What is mainly affecting the gas pricing today also is foreign exchange. You know, the foreign exchange, a lot of the gas is being imported. One of the things that is being suggested is that we take out VAT from imported gas. And that if we do that, it's going to crash the price of gas. And you know, whether we're going to take out the VAT as is being suggested, but while that is being contemplated, we also have to think of the local producers as well. So we're looking at it. We're going to have meetings with the gas producers and, of course, the importers of gas, and then we'll get a middle course and we'll take a decision that will be best for everybody.
All right, let's talk export matters now as we join Titi Ojo to give us tips on how to successfully export our products to other regions and also intra-African markets.
So today I'll be talking about Incoterms. Incoterm means international commercial terms. If you're someone or a company that is interested in venturing into export or international trade, you need to understand Incoterms. That's absolutely necessary because they're terminologies that, as a buyer or a seller, of course, in that process, there's a buyer and there's a seller. So Incoterms dictates the relationship between the buyer and the seller. It talks about the tasks, the cost, the risks that are associated in that particular transaction. Who is protected? Who does what? Who pays for what? If there's a damage, who covers it? So it's important that you understand Incoterms. And the latest Incoterm is called Incoterm 2020. It was published by the International Chamber of Commerce. So you could actually go online and find, look for Incoterms 2020. That's actually the latest. It talks about the relationship between the buyer and the seller. Now look at this. If you're entering a business transaction, you also need to understand, are your risks covered? Who covers it? Who covers the cost of transportation? Who covers the cost of insurance? Who covers the cost of duties? What's my role in this transaction? Very important. You know why it's important as well? Because you're entering a contract. When you're entering an export contract with your buyer, you are the seller, you have a buyer. If you're entering a contract, then you have to base them on certain Incoterms. We both agree that this is how it's going to be. Very important. Now, let me give you an example of an Incoterm. We have free on board, for example. Free on board is an Incoterm that is used for sea and inland waterway transportation. Now, in this case, the seller delivers the goods on board the vessel that's going to transport the goods. When the seller delivers it on that vessel, as stipulated by the buyer, because the buyer is saying, I want you to use this particular vessel. So you obey that to that very point. And it tells you, this is my port of shipment. You've agreed on that. Now, if the seller gets the products on top of the vessel at that port of shipment, that free on board tells you that the risk of that transportation from that point forward is borne by the buyer. So that's an Incoterm. And we have several Incoterms. And like I said earlier, you need to study them to understand what kind of contracts exist.
It's time for the market review, and we are joining Professor Uche Uwaleke to tell us how the market fared. Prof, how did the market do this week?
This week has been a beautiful week for the equities market, a continuation of what we saw the previous week. You recall that the previous week, the equities market gained 1.61%, and this week we are also witnessing another gain of 1.39%. So cumulatively, we are having a month-to-date return, if you like, of about 3%. So since the month began, as a matter of fact, the equities market has recorded gains all through, except for Monday, when we saw just a marginal halt, when the market fell by just minus 3.8%. But by and large, it's been a bullish month, and that's not surprising. It's a reflection of the confidence that investors have in the market. It's a reflection of the positive sentiment, which we can also see in the market breadths. All through the month and all through the week in particular, we've seen more of gainers than losers. This week in particular, except for Monday, when we recorded a negative market breadth, the rest of the days recorded a positive market breadth. And by that I mean, more gainers, than losers. So the positive sentiment, again, is a reflection of the relative macroeconomic stability we are beginning to have. The inflation numbers, headline inflation number for the month of September has just come in, which shows that inflation rate, has further decelerated to 16.63% as opposed to 17.01% in August. So decelerating inflation, economic activities picking up again, as evident in the GDP numbers, and overall the as I said, relative macroeconomic stability. The budget appropriation bill for 2022 has also been presented, and we're also expecting you know, a number of these companies, quoted companies, to also churn in their results. So all these are contributing to the positive market sentiment, you know, we are currently witnessing. And another interesting thing I must mention that happened this week has to do with the virtual closing gong ceremony, you know, on the exchange to mark the listing of the Nigerian Exchange Group, a PLC, on the exchange. So the Nigerian Exchange Group is now being listed on the exchange, and what that means is that it is now going public. So you and I can afford now to buy the shares of Nigerian Exchange, of course following the mutualization that was carried out, unlike previously. So overall, I would say that the market still holds a lot of promise, the equities market in particular, and my advice to investors, as always, is to ensure that they seek proper advice, the type that will enable them diversify their portfolio, and then, of course, you know, with a view to minimizing risk and maximizing their return.
For now, the best and most efficient way to avoid getting infected is through regular hygienic and sanitary practices, as well as social distancing. As individuals, we remain the greatest weapon to fight this pandemic. By washing our hands regularly with clean water and soap, disinfecting frequently used surfaces and areas, coughing into a tissue or elbow, and strictly adhering to infection prevention control measures in health facilities, we can contain this virus.
All right, on that note, we conclude Business 24 for this week. We'll come your way again next week with another exciting package of the program Business 24. I'm Comfort Amadu. Join me again next week.